was once a rich kingdom. It was ruled over by a king who lived in a gorgeous palace built on the lakeside. This king was extremely rich and powerful. Although he was well advised by his ministers, he often found that the burden of ruling weighed heavily on his shoulders. Seeing his king look so careworn one day, the chief minister told his master that he should not give in to his sadness, that he should not let his worries overcome him. This good advice greatly annoyed the king. How dare his chief minister imply that he was wiser than his king? He asked the minister if he wouldn't be concerned if he, the minister, had so many cares. But the wise man replied that he would not give in to sadness. The angry king abruptly ordered his minister from the council chamber, while he turned to receive an emissary from a far-off monarch who had come to pay his respects. This messenger had brought a gift of a priceless gem from his master as a token of his great admiration for the king. When he opened the wonderfully carved box, the king beheld a ruby so large that it fitted in the palm of his hand. The sight of the ruby gave him an idea of how he could punish his minister for his presumption. He strolled out on the pleasant terrace, where his minister was pacing anxiously up and down, and greeted him in a friendly fashion. He showed the man the ruby he had been given, and told him how much it meant to him. "Look after it carefully for me," he instructed his minister, "for I value it and the friendship of the man who gave it to me very greatly." The minister was quite astonished at his king's abrupt change of mood, but of course was quite ready to grant his royal master's request. Thus they parted on seemingly the most friendly terms. The minister did not see the king's smile of self-satisfaction as he hurried home to tell his wife about the king's strange behavior. Of course, the minister's wife was very pleased at the trust and honor the king had bestowed on her husband, although she agreed that looking after such a gem was a great responsibility. She was extremely proud of the way in which her husband had conducted himself, and thought he was the best advisor the king could ever hope to have. While they would have to hide such a magnificent gem very carefully, it was still possible to find a safe hiding place for it. "Since it is so precious, it will go where all my other precious jewels are hidden," she declared. "Nobody but us knows where I keep them." So saying, she stowed it away in her own jewelry box, and the minister and his wife breathed a sigh of relief that the matter was so easily dealt with. Little did they know that their maid was in the king's pay, and he had already instructed her to find the ruby and bring it back to him. Diligently the maid searched, for she had a good idea where her mistress kept all her valued possessions, as that good lady often trusted her to collect something from her jewel box. It didn't take her long to find the box where the ruby had been so safely hidden. hiding place and hurried back to the king. The king was delighted. I shall teach my minister not to lecture me, he thought, and threw the ruby far into the lake. He burst out laughing at the thought of the joke he would play on the hapless minister. At the next meeting of the royal ministers, the king seemed to be in an excellent mood. He joked with all his ministers and appeared not to have a care in the world. The chief minister was astonished at this change of mood, but just assumed that the king had taken his words to heart. When the meeting finished, the king called the minister to his side and asked him if the ruby was quite safe. Happily, the minister assured him that it was. "Good," replied the king, "for I should like you to return it to me tomorrow after the ministerial meeting." So, of course, the first thing the minister asked from his wife that evening was the ruby. Without concern, his wife went to fetch it from her jewel box. And she looked, and looked, and looked. With growing panic, she scrambled through all her drawers, emptying them of the jewels and fine silks they held. But although they contained many other precious things, the ruby was not there. The ministerial meeting the following day seemed endless to the unhappy minister. Never had the king seemed to be in such a jovial mood. Never had he seemed to keep his ministers so long, joking with them, discussing various matters and asking their advice. Of course, the minister tried to appear calm while his mind was in a turmoil. How could that ruby have vanished so? What would the king say? What would he do when the minister confessed to him that the ruby was lost? The king's sharp eyes didn't miss his minister's pallor or his silent, thoughtful mood, although he was trying his best to appear his normal self. And the king enjoyed his minister's discomfiture to the full. To tease his minister further, the king addressed most of his remarks to the unhappy man, asking him for advice on the most difficult topics. Should he burden a certain province with more taxes? How should he keep the peace with a warlike neighbor? Should he marry his daughter to such and such a king? At last, the meeting was concluded, and the minister bravely told the king that somehow the ruby was lost. At first, the minister was relieved by the king's reaction. The king smiled and told him not to worry. After all, if he didn't return the ruby within 7 days, all that would happen would be that the minister and his wife would be imprisoned for the rest of their lives. The minister was appalled at the king's harshness, but the king simply repeated 7 days and abruptly dismissed him. The minister's wife was greatly dismayed at the king's cruelty and injustice. She loved her husband very dearly and would gladly follow him to prison, but how cruel of the king to reward his faithful minister in this manner. she declared after thinking for some minutes. "You should yourself take the advice you gave the king. You must not let sadness overcome you. At least we have each other in our hour of pain. Since we have only 7 days together, let us make them the best days of our lives. Let us spend the time feasting and dancing among all our friends and family. After all, what opportunity will come our way when we are in a dark dungeon?" The minister joyfully agreed to his wife's wise words, and the house was thrown open to all their friends and neighbours. Word spread far and wide of the magnificent party the chief minister was giving. There were singers and dancers, the best in the whole land. The minister and his wife made sure that nobody was forgotten. Everyone was invited to join in the merrymaking, from the oldest grandfather to the prettiest girl to the youngest grandchild. The rich and the not so rich all donned their finest clothes and eagerly joined in the celebrations. But the people who enjoyed the party most were the minister and his wife. Their charity and generosity forgot nobody. They were determined that everyone would remember this wonderful party. Even their servants were not forgotten. And for the maid who had betrayed her, the wife had a special gift, a necklace of gold which she knew the girl had often coveted. And what an array of delicacies the team of cooks had prepared. Nobody had ever seen such a spread before, and everybody did full justice to it. The minister and his wife made sure that every guest had enough to eat. None of the guests knew about the king's cruel sentence given to the minister and his wife. Certainly none would have guessed from their carefree, happy mood. Indeed, most of the guests thought that the minister had received new honors from the king, so lavish were the festivities. As the celebrations continued day after day, the condemned couple found that their cares and worries did recede. Although they would be imprisoned for the rest of their lives, at least they had the opportunity now to enjoy their last days of freedom in the best way possible. And they wanted everyone to enjoy the feasting and dancing and merrymaking as much as they did. Since they knew what would soon happen to them, they could enjoy each minute to the full, and enjoy themselves they did. Never had food tasted so delicious, never had the music sounded so sweet, and never had their love for each other been greater. In fact, the minister began to feel quite sorry for the king. He could understand how such a man, overburdened with so many responsibilities, would be frightened of making a wrong decision. Although he had been the king's closest advisor, nonetheless the minister, after all, did not actually have to rule, and that made a great difference. Even the beggars off the streets were invited in to enjoy the feast and partake of the minister's bounty. What is my sadness, the minister thought. It is only something that I feel myself, whereas everyone can enjoy the pleasure of this happy occasion. Even the poor flower seller, who had been invited in to deck the guests with her garlands, was not forgotten. The minister showered her with gold coins. The flower seller, overwhelmed by her luck and not staying any longer, hurried off to the market to tell her friend the fish seller about her amazing good fortune. She urged the woman to hurry to the minister's house with her fish, where he would surely give her gold coins too. The woman sadly showed the feeble catch she had to sell, and as luck would have it, her husband arrived at that very moment carrying an enormous fish he had just caught. "That is certainly fine enough for the minister," the delighted woman cried, and without any further delay hurried to the minister's house with her fish. She arrived as the party was drawing to a close. The guests were enjoying the last performance the singers and dancers were giving, eating up the last sweetmeats, drinking the last drops of sherbet. Everybody agreed it was the very best party they had ever attended. The fisherman's wife waited patiently until the minister and his wife had said goodbye to the last guest, and then humbly presented her gift to them. "As this is our last day of freedom, I shall myself cook this fish for you," the minister's wife told her husband. So the minister gave the woman a handful of gold, and without any further ado, his wife set about preparing the fish for the oven. Difficult to cut, but when the minister's wife had sliced open its belly, she could see why. The ruby lay there, quite unharmed and gleaming in the light. How did it get there? What kind God had placed it so they would find it? His mind in a turmoil, the minister hurried to the king, carrying his precious burden in a silk scarf. "Sire, sire," he cried, "see, I have your ruby safe and sound. I thought it was lost forever, yet the gods have restored it to us." The king gazed in astonishment, as well he might, at the precious jewel. He demanded to know how it had come back into the minister's possession. So the minister told him of their decision not to let their sorrow overcome them, but to throw a party that everyone would enjoy. Deeply ashamed, the king then confessed his cruel trick to the minister, how he had thrown the ruby into the lake simply to try and show up his minister. But I was wrong, he concluded, and you were right. You have taught me a great lesson I shall never forget. You are indeed wiser than I am. Because he had not been prepared to admit that his minister was wiser than he had behaved unjustly to his most trusted adviser. And yet, because the minister had taken his own advice, he had truly proved that one should never let sorrow gain the upper hand. He ordered his servant to bring his jewel box containing his finest jewels, which he gave to his minister, begging him to accept this gift as a small reparation for the suffering the king had caused him and his wife. The minister was quite overwhelmed at the king's generosity. Not only was he relieved at his pardon, but also that he was once again a wealthy man. The king stared at the ruby for a long time, thinking over its strange history and the lesson it had taught him.